This video is sponsored by BetterHelp. Managing your mental health is a difficult task, not least because it's hard to know where to even begin. Each of us are going to be subject to different pressures, stresses, and difficulties, making our potential mental health struggles unique, and therefore sometimes hard to explain to the people in our lives. It's easy to end up feeling isolated, but you're not alone. This is why we are sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist. So if you're introverted or just not in the mood for it, you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. There is a broad range of expertise in BetterHelp's 20,000 plus therapists network that gives you access to help that might not be available in your area. Many people who've looked for therapists might find that the people in their local area are simply not specialized in what you're looking for and dealing with. BetterHelp solves this problem. All you do is fill out a questionnaire to help assess your specific needs, and then you get matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. Then you schedule secure video and phone sessions. Plus, you can exchange unlimited messages, and everything you share is, of course, completely confidential. Anytime you want, you can request a new therapist at no additional charge. So many people use BetterHelp that they're currently recruiting additional therapists in many areas, including all 50 states in the US. Join the 2 million plus people who have taken charge of their mental health with BetterHelp. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lovewho. You can find that link down below in the description of this video. The difference between healthy and unhealthy versions of a type can sometimes be greater than that between different types. Unhealthy types are imbalanced in a way that is detrimental to themselves and people around them. Balance, from the standpoint of personality types, can be achieved in various ways. It's not necessarily about taking away from your strengths and focusing on weaknesses that offer diminishing returns. It's about making sure that your natural weaknesses and blind spots don't catch you out in major ways that set you back. The balance can be internal, where you focus on changing the way you think and feel about things, but can also be externalized and achieved through setting up your environment in a more helpful way, including, as I often say, fostering complementary relationships where you balance each other out. Istps. Unhealthy Istps will be impulsive, reckless, sensation-seeking, and plagued by a seemingly unappeasable compulsion to satisfy whatever desire the moment lays before them. They won't spend much time, if any, planning for the long term. They might not see their future selves as real. Instead, devouring the present moment with little thought for the consequences. In their desire for impact and intensity at all costs, they'll find themselves escalating their behavior and indulging in risky activities, pushing themselves too far, potentially even to the point of abusing their bodies in certain ways. Healthy Istps are masters of calculated risks, knowing that their adaptability, razor-sharp reactions, and quick thinking will allow them to find a way to succeed and win, even in difficult situations. Instead of waking up and treating each day like it's the only thing that exists, they'll place themselves on longer-term paths where their grounding in the present moment will be constantly moving them forward, or placing themselves in some system, institution, or workplace, where they can work their way towards more opportunities and have that sense of direction taken care of for them. Entps. Unhealthy Entps very much live up to their stereotype of being, especially when younger, debate lords who flex their intellect and edginess in equal measure, often taking oppositional stances to anything and everything. They might be reluctant to settle on anything, from a definitive stance on an issue to a life path they want to pursue, instead being blown on the breeze of their whims and ever-changing interests, being totally chaotic and a source of chaos to the people around them. The small details, paperwork, and bureaucracy of life will be largely ignored, leading to them being caught out and derailed when these things come back to haunt them. Healthy Entps will use their powers of perspective to foster consensus and unify people, not just to win arguments, but to bring about progress. They'll see the benefit of diligence, consistency, follow-through, and sometimes stay in the course, even when the grass of that course looks remarkably less green than others. They will learn to either respect, or at the very least grin and bear, the red tape, the maintenance, and the administrative aspects of life. Healthy, well-developed, and mature Entps might be one of the hardest types to spot, precisely because they deviate from the stereotype so much. Intps. Unhealthy INTPs are going to be logical sledgehammers on the intellectual prowl for uninformed and ignorant heads to make into their nails. They'll typically undervalue the deep worth of navigating and pushing through the painful parts of relationships of all kinds, instead being more isolated from and skeptical of people in general. Mental ruts, inaction, and passivity will be problems for them, struggling with inertia and failing to gain momentum on things they want to achieve. They'll be content to explore the life of the mind without turning that into something tangible and impactful. Healthy INTPs will replace any intentional or unintentional condescension with a teacher's and guiding mindset, giving people leeway and understanding. They will, quite logically, realize that strict adherence to logic and rationality is simply one way of approaching life, just as beneficial and flawed as the many other approaches. They'll see the value of taking action consistently in life, occasionally jumping into things and saying yes more often, seeing adventures in flesh world as being on the same level as adventures of the mind. Isfjs. Unhealthy Isfjs will be overly set in their ways, resistant to change, strong-headed, stubborn, and rigid, and therefore skeptical of taking bold and transformative action, focusing narrowly on maintaining what they currently have and letting contentment and comfort take precedence over growth. Their desire for control over their lives and environment might prevent them from embracing the chaos necessary to truly thrive and realize their potential in life. They might also be too willing to make sacrifices for the people in their life at their own expense and fail to put their own needs first when that's necessary. Healthy Isfjs will see the virtue in helping others, but realize there's no virtue in self-sacrifice to the point of martyrdom. They'll also see chaos, disruption, and uncertainty for what they are in life, inevitable, and therefore will be content to accept that, although they can't control the wind and the waves, they can adjust their sails accordingly when navigating the often tumultuous seas of life. They'll realize that their natural ability to maximize the resources they have and circumstances they find themselves in means that they're one of the best types to seek out new things and find new fertile ground in life to build on. Isfps. Unhealthy Isfps are broody and moody, trading their natural warmth for fieriness. They long for independence, and given that life often seems to be out to rob people of that, it can be a dangerous recipe for an unhealthy Isfp. If they feel restricted or forced to live in ways that are unappealing to them, then they'll withdraw or lash out, depending on their mood. Isfps, contrary to certain descriptions and stereotypes, have empathy as one of their main strengths. When they are unhealthy, they're focused more on themselves and how they think things should be, to the point where they're dismissive or downright combative with other people who see things differently. Healthy Isfps will be tolerant, understanding, and accepting of people, taking their own need for individuality and recognizing and respecting it in others too, even if they might disagree with that person's beliefs and approach. They'll see that sometimes the best way to take control of their life is to jump through a few of those hoops that society pushes our way. It might not be pleasant in the moment, but it will result in the increased independence that they desire eventually. ESFPs. Unhealthy ESFPs are people who follow what feels good in the moment, regardless of the consequences. Their sheer force of personality can be weaponized in favor of selfish goals, such as the pursuit of unbridled hedonism, or wanting to always be the center of attention. Self-serving indulgence will be the name of the game. They are types who are remarkable at getting what they want, but the problem with ESFPs when they are unhealthy is that they want, well, some crazy things. They'll also somewhat bowl people over, and not in a good way. Healthy ESFPs will use their kinetic personalities to help energize and inspire others around them, acting more as catalysts for action instead of drains on other people's energy. They'll find ways to point themselves in good directions in life, so their sometimes mercurial nature is not something that derails them from their long-term plans. Their desire in the moment won't undermine their desires for their future selves. They'll learn to be masters of, rather than servants of, impulsivity, using their spontaneity as a gift, both for themselves and others to enjoy. ENFPs. Unhealthy ENFPs can feel perpetually dissatisfied with, in their view, the stagnant state of society and the humdrum aspects of daily life. In their desire for invention, discovery, and imaginative optimism, they might pursue highly unrealistic ideas, philosophies, and even political beliefs, wanting to tear down what currently exists and not just reinvent the wheel, but reinvent everything else too. Failing to see the need for the systems and structures that already exist in society, and discounting needing to pay attention to details. They might also be too willing to follow their emotional whims down whatever bizarre avenues and alleyways it takes them, becoming somewhat ungrounded as a result. Healthy ENFPs will be happier to, most of the time, accept things as they are in order to make changes and improvements in specific areas and focus their innovative powers more, being content with incremental progress. They'll make sure to create necessary structure, routines, and habits to keep themselves grounded in concrete reality, making sure that their imaginative wanderings don't take them off into the unconventional ether. They'll get the basics of life, the foundational stuff, right. From there, they can let loose more and be unleashed. INFPs. Unhealthy INFPs will be uncompromising in their values, beliefs, and ideals, to the point where they alienate themselves from others, or from society in general. Everything will start to feel like an almost conspiratorial scheme. A big machine that conspires to make them a cog, who has given up what is really important to them, in order to simply get by, jump through hoops, and play the game. This sense of alienation can run deep with them, feeling like perpetual outsiders. They might also struggle to get themselves out of ruts, falling into inertia, and not getting started on things that would push them forward in life. They might also be chronically disorganized as well, lacking a life path and direction, being too swayed by emotional whims, and floating out on an ocean of feelings. Healthy INFPs will exercise more pragmatism in their life. They'll know that not everyone is going to see the world the way they do, and that sometimes people fall short of their expectations, but that's natural, and not a terrible thing. They'll also have much more tolerance for working within the system itself. With a bit of bending and compromise, and even fitting in, they can change things from the inside and make a tangible difference, as opposed to being perched on their outsider's ledge indefinitely. They'll foster the ability to see things in a detached and objective way, to see the distinction between their emotional reaction to a thing and the reality of a thing, which aren't always going to be the same. ISTJs. Unhealthy ISTJs will feel, for want of a better phrase, threatened by the new. When someone comes along with an innovative or revolutionary approach, or even simply a plan that attempts to take a bold risk, they'll be quite resistant to that, or skeptical at the very least. Because most attempts at innovation fail, it's quite sensible to assume that at any given point, the innovative plan you're being presented with is naive, misguided, and doomed to failure. The problem is, that's simply the nature of change. It requires trial, error, and iteration. After a certain point in life, ISTJs become masters of their domain, which can blind them to new ways of doing things. It's the, if it ain't broke, don't fix it mindset. But sometimes, when we're used to something, we can't tell that it is actually broken in certain ways. Unhealthy ISTJs will be the champions of bad habits. They'll also be socially brutal, simply because they don't care about the, in their view, superficial aspects of interactions. Say what you mean and mean what you say would be an apt ISTJ motto, but that doesn't always go down well. Healthy ISTJs will still be masters of their domain, people who've achieved mastery in their specific area, or in their life in general. However, they'll be receptive to those moments where they need to branch out, take a risk, upgrade their skill set, and challenge some of their foundational beliefs about the way things are. Healthy ISTJs, while rarely caring enough to be social schmoozers, will have a certain gracefulness in social settings, almost like a gentlemanly or gentlewomanly disposition. Their potentially blunt, overly on-the-nose nature will be tempered and taken control of as they learn the do's and don'ts and the rules of the social realm. ESTJs. Unhealthy ESTJs are productivity prioritizing machines at the expense of some of these social niceties, treating people and themselves more like cogs in a machine, falling victim to being workaholics, or defining the success of their days in terms of how much they've checked off their to-do list, as opposed to whether they actually enjoyed themselves or not. They can fall into the trap of very efficiently, effectively, and energetically going around in circles, not connecting their day-to-day activities together into a more long-term vision for their lives. When unhealthy, ESTJs are more likely to suppress their emotions. Their primary mode of making decisions will be to do so on the basis of what makes sense, in a detached and pragmatic way, sometimes being out of touch with other kinds of values. Healthy ESTJs have a much wider and deeper understanding and tolerance for people's different ways of working and getting things done. Although in theory, there is an objectively best or most efficient way to get something done, that isn't going to work for everyone. People have their quirks, eccentricities, and individual ways of doing things. Healthy ESTJs will accept this, and in turn, will become much better leaders and collaborators because of it. Also, they'll be able to make much better long-term life decisions when their emotional and even philosophical values are aligned with their natural skill set of being able to get things done. ISTPs. Unhealthy ISTPs are misanthropic and negatively nihilistic in their outlook. Their natural pragmatism and realism spills over too far to the point where it takes some of the magic out of life. If they find themselves in situations in life that are unpleasant to them, they might sometimes struggle to see ways out of it. Or, conversely, in other moments, they might be paranoid, seeing multiple ways in which things could go wrong or are going wrong, including seeing negative intentions in others that might not actually be there. Isolation is definitely a risk too, where they adopt that lone wolf approach to life, which can often come too naturally for them. I imagine ISTPs, when less healthy, being acerbic and biting in their wit, often dropping some truly brutal one-liner put-downs on people for no good reason. Healthy ISTPs will have their relationships with people figured out, possibly in the form of a close inner circle that they feel comfortable letting in and trusting. ISTPs also have a protective streak within them, so it's always a good sign when they have people in their life who elicit that protective instinct. Being more bonded to people, in general, is a sign of healthiness for ISTPs, as opposed to being loners. They'll also avoid being stuck in any kind of loops that they can't see ways out of. That feeling of the walls closing in on them will be less common, and less of a fear that drives them to want to escape certain situations. INFJs. Unhealthy INFJs make the mistake of focusing on other people to a detrimental degree. This results in them, surprisingly for a feeling type, being out of touch with their own feelings. They can also struggle with setting boundaries with people, getting too invested in their lives, and trying to solve their problems, sometimes as a way to avoid addressing their own. They might also fall into certain kinds of perfectionism too, wanting things to unfold precisely as they've envisioned. Also, a subcategory of this would be them waiting for the perfect moment to strike or take action, whereas in reality, the perfect moment is often the soonest possible moment. Healthy INFJs will be more willing to jump into things, roll with the punches of life, take bold action, even when they're being struck by anticipatory or performance anxiety, and value movement and momentum as much as pondering and planning. They'll also be able to say no to people, both in terms of setting boundaries, but also holding back in getting too involved and invested in other people's lives and problems, learning to introspect on their own emotions and motivations, instead of focusing their attention perpetually on others. ENFJs. Unhealthy ENFJs I would describe as people pleasers to a fault, putting the emotional or perceived emotional sensitivities of other people above all else. It's a constant state of pulling punches, which can lead to unspoken truths, festering and building to the point where they boil over, coming out anyway, just in a much more explosive way. They'll also have imbalances in their relationships, where they're giving more than they're getting. Initially, they'll be happy with this arrangement, but the seemingly inevitable lack of reciprocation will eventually cause issues, making them feel undervalued and underappreciated. Another slightly overlooked aspect of ENFJs is their tendency towards being workaholics. Perhaps not always in the conventional career-oriented sense, but certainly when it comes to pushing themselves too hard. Healthy ENFJs will learn the benefit of tolerating that momentary sting that comes from being blunt, disagreeable, and upfront in their opinions, knowing that the initial pain of that will save much more difficulty further down the line. They'll also learn to hold back in relationships, and not go all out from day one, trying to make an amazing impression, but in turn, making above and beyond, on their part, the norm, and therefore an expectation on the part of the other person. They'll be much more aware of their physical well-being too, making sure to not overdo things and run the risk of burning out. ESFJs. Unhealthy ESFJs will be involved in lots of social drama, indulging too much in the politics of personal relationships, sometimes being overbearing or intrusive with the business of others, and all in all, caring too much about their social image, standing, and reputation. They can be too preoccupied with day-to-day tasks that aren't going to lead into big picture and long-term plans for their life, essentially not seeing the forest for the trees. Also, like many of the high FE types, they can fall into imbalanced relationships where they give quite selflessly and find that other people aren't on their level in this regard, even when they're trying to reciprocate. Healthy ESFJs will have much more balance in their life, where things aren't overly focused on and dependent on their social relationships exclusively. That way, any drama in that area won't become all-consuming. They'll also resist the urge to go all out on their strengths of charming and wooing people and wrapping them up in various nurturing and entertaining delights. Instead, they let people first show that they are willing to give too in relationships. So things are more fair and balanced right from the offset. Intjs. Unhealthy Intjs are like day-to-day dictators, people whose commanding nature is irrepressible and has negative effects. Although Intjs can actually be quite socially introverted at times, nonetheless, they're always going to be big personalities, sometimes too big for other people to handle. Given that they're drawn towards leadership positions, this can be problematic, where they run over people and neglect some of the more subtle and gentle aspects of leadership, which are equally as important. Unhealthy Intjs will also have an externalized sense of self-worth, defining themselves by their accomplishments and achievements, sometimes sacrificing their own happiness and well-being, both physical and mental, on the altar of making a big impact in life. The notion of legacy will often be appealing to them, but they can sacrifice too much at times in the name of that. Healthy Intjs will see that there's a huge power in being vulnerable, both because it makes them more relatable and likely to inspire different kinds of respect from other people. They learn to be okay with leaving extra achievements, financial gain, and so on the table, in favor of seeking less tangible but far more meaningful things in life. Getting to understand what matters to them authentically and emotionally, and aligning those desires with their life, as opposed to letting their career or projects be completely dominating. Intjs. Unhealthy Intjs will be looking down upon humanity from their ivory towers, which double as an evil lair. Their constant need to improve things, and therefore tendency to see the flaws in so many things, gives them a strange mixture of superiority and also disappointment with the way things are. It's that idealist, cynic duality or contradiction that so often characterizes them. Because of their sometimes impossibly high standards, it can stop them from taking action in life and putting their plans into practice, since they know they'll have to compromise, deal with people, well, just people, and all of the annoying issues of playing politics, navigating egos, and having to communicate constantly to reiterate what needs to be done. At this point, the extent to which Intjs are cold is overplayed. However, blunt and direct is definitely a highly common trait. When this isn't kept in check, they can unintentionally offend their way through life, burning bridges in the process. Healthy Intjs know for a fact that their standards can't always be met. Perhaps they can't ever be met, especially when they have to work with other people. Rather than taking this reality and becoming insular and isolated in an attempt to rely only on themselves, since they are the only people who have a chance of meeting their own standards, healthy Intjs will take this on the chin and choose getting some progress done over chasing perfection. They'll also recognize their tendency towards brutal bluntness and take one of two approaches. Either they'll be more upfront about it, so people know it's just their way, after all. That is a very direct approach to solving this problem. Or they'll try to smooth over some of the more pointed and jagged edges,